The leech has two daughters. Give, give, they cry. There are three things that are never satisfied. Four that never say enough. The grave, the barren womb, land, which is never satisfied with water, and fire that never says enough. Proverbs 30, verses 15 and 16. You are listening to the Resilient Masculinity Podcast. Welcome. My name is William Betzelberger. I am the host and founder of the Resilient Masculinity Podcast and Movement. Welcome here, welcome back, and thank you for joining us today. We're in our third installment of Season 2 of the Resilient Masculinity Podcast. We're diving in and getting nitty and gritty into our three S's that a man provides: safety, stability, and service. Last week we talked about the need for men to be physically fit and physically strong to provide safety to themselves, their families, their businesses, their communities, and their churches. And today we're going to talk about another way that men, in particular, are supposed to provide safety. And that today is about fire protection. You may be wondering, well, we talk about safety, we talk about, later on we'll talk about being armed, what different kind of weapon systems, you may have thought about various guns you want to have, you may have thought about security systems or door locks, but one thing that men don't often think about is fire protection. And why is that? Well, if we're honest, most of us think it's pretty unlikely that we'll face a fire. Most of us think it's pretty unlikely that we'll have to put out a fire, unless, of course, you might be burning some leaves in the backyard or something, and you got a hose and a bucket, and, you're safe, you're fine. But is that really the truth? And what can we, as men who are supposed to be the protectors and providers of our household, how can we keep our houses safe from fire? What are ways we can help, those who are in need if they do have a fire? That's what we're going to dive into today. So, with that, I'm going to list some interesting and insightful statistics. This is from thezebra.com. This is House Fire Statistics, updated as of January 5th, 2023. It says key insights and statistics. I'm just going to read these out for you, and these may be things you know, but my guess is you won't know these. And in fact, these are new. Some of these are new information for me. So, in a 5-year period, house fires caused 2,620 deaths and $6.9 billion, billion with B, in property damage. In 2018, the national average was 2.5 civilian fire deaths and 9.8 injuries per 1,000 fires. The top 3 causes of house fires are 1. Cooking, 2. Heating equipment, and 3. Electrical malfunctions. It takes just 30 seconds for a small fire to turn into a major blaze. The average of 358,500 homes per year experience a structural fire. And that has stayed consistent in the last 5 years. More than 3,000 Americans, or 1/10% of all Americans, or 1/100%, 300 million, 100,000 million, so yeah, like 0.001% of all Americans die in a house fire each year, and then every day at least one child dies from a fire inside a home. So gentlemen, may I propose to you that part of your duty as being a protector and providing safety, so that we need to look at what are the safety issues that our families face. What are the realistic risks? Because we can talk about guns all day. In fact, just for the tube, because this is going to get banned anyway, I'm strapped right now. Okay? But So I'm set if there's someone who pops in here and tries to hurt us. But what about if a fire breaks out in the kitchen right over there? Do I have a fire extinguisher? Or do my smoke detectors work? Do I even know if they work? What are things that we can do to help keep our families safe? So let's think about this from a practical standpoint, okay? During the summer, I bought 2 fire extinguishers. It was a combination set from, I believe it was Lowe's or Home Depot for about $45, okay? It was a standard ABC fire extinguisher and a kitchen fire extinguisher. I bought those because when we made the move from Michigan to Oklahoma, we left our fire extinguishers at the apartment. So I didn't have a fire extinguisher for several months, and I knew I needed one. Do you know how to operate a fire extinguisher? Do you know what PASS stands for? If you don't know what PASS is, it's the standard protocol for how you operate a fire extinguisher. So you got your squeeze handle and you got your nozzle, okay? So you point it at the fire, you aim, you squeeze, and you sweep. Do you know that usually you have to pull a cotter pin to be able to pull or squeeze the handle? You do. So there's that. Do you know that? Do your kids know that? Does your wife know that? If she's making a delicious meal and a fire breaks out on the stove, does she know where the fire extinguisher is? For us, I keep our kitchen one directly under the kitchen sink. It is on the right-hand side. It is the first thing you can grab on the right-hand side. And I made sure my wife knew where it was and how to use it. And then the second one, the bigger one, because I work on woodworking projects and because that's where the majority of our bigger equipment, like our washer and dryer, is, I've kept the second one in the garage. It's mounted on a bracket right outside the garage door, this door here to the side, that we can access it very quickly if need be, and we both know how to use it. My wife and I, before we moved, we were part of our hometowns, my hometown, part of our county's Community Emergency Response Team, CERT, and through that we also learned how to put out a fire with fire extinguishers. We went to a fire station. They had a gas setup where you actually had to use a fire extinguisher and extinguish the fire using FEMA standard protocol or standard operating procedures. So that is actually another thing I want to get to eventually, is community emergency response teams, disaster preparedness, but that's another video, another episode for another day. Let's keep talking about fire protection. Do you know where your smoke detectors are? Have you tested them recently? Do you know if the batteries still work? Most of the time, we don't check ours, as a general, people do not check theirs until theirs starts chirping that the battery's dead. Okay? In theory, in practice, what you should be doing is testing them once a month, holding your finger to the button to test it until it actually beeps. That way you know it's active, it works. Check the batteries, see if they still work. Make sure you, your wife, and your kids know how these things work. This is a practical, everyday example of what it means to provide safety to your family. Making sure your family knows how to act in an emergency, what the high likelihoods of those emergencies are, and knowing how to respond and then how to decompress from those emergencies is vital if you want to build a resilient family business. For example, in woodworking, you're going to need to know how to put out a small fire and how to decompress from that. If your wife loves baking and you have a baking side business, well, that's great. But if all her stuff is burned because there was a fire, do you know how to decompress from that? Do you know how traumatizing that is? You need to have a plan. And as men, as the protectors and the providers, those who provide safety and stability, That's our job. Our job is to plan these things out. Our job is to ensure that our families are safe. So the cost of a fire suppression system in the form of fire extinguishers and smoke detectors is about $100, thereabouts. You buy a couple of fire extinguishers for about $20 to $30. You buy a couple of smoke detectors for $10 to $20. You're running about $100, maybe $150. For example, the gun I showed you, that was a $600 handgun, and that's a pretty normal price for a handgun. Guys, it is so much more likely that you're going to experience a house fire. It is vastly more likely that you're going to experience a house fire. So please, spend a couple $100 and get yourself fire extinguishers, smoke detectors, and know how to use them. Buy an extra one and use it as a practice tool. I used to carry one in my car all the time, and when it expired, what I did was I set a fire up in my parents' backyard, with their permission of course, and I used it. I set up a fire in the fire pit, and I used the expired fire extinguisher, and I tested my knowledge and my skill, and I was able to successfully put the fire out. Let's go over a few extra details about fire extinguishers. Do you know the types of them? Okay, the most common that people use are A, B, and C. There are different types of fire extinguishers. There's A, B, C, and I believe K. Let me pull up the correct information because I don't want to give you the wrong information. Yes, there's A, B, C, D, and K. So type A is an ordinary combustible, think wood, paper, cloth. That would be a type A fire. Type B fires are flammable liquids, think gasoline, paints, oils, and grease. Type C are live electrical equipment or electrical fires, think electrical wiring, fuse boxes, shorts, those type of things. Type D is combustible metal, so graphite, magnesium, those sorts of things. Usually, you're not going to have those unless you work in an industrial or a mining setting. That's very unlikely within the normal sphere of most average lives. And then there's K, which is commercial cooking equipment. Think commercial cooking, stoves and ovens. Think about the oil equipment, like the really high refinery type things. Your most classic for home are going to be ABC, which will cover wood, paper, cloth, gas, paint, oil, and electrical. So think of all those things. That's the majority of what our houses are, right? We have wood in the studs and the floor joists. We have paper and cloth, clothing, paperwork. We have electrical running through the walls. We have grease on the stove. We have gas in the cars. All of those things, those are going to be covered under your A, B, C type fire extinguishers. And then kitchen ones, they're smaller, they're white, they're usually colored white to distinguish them. Those are usually the type Ks. They could also be A, B, C, but they're mostly Ks. So educate yourself on those things. Teach your kids those things. I remember as a kid we used to learn stop, drop, and roll. I don't know if they still teach that, but it's still ingrained in me. If my clothes ever catch fire, stop what you do, you drop to the ground, and you roll. And we've done that, we've taught that since the at least late 90s, early 2000s, because that's when I learned it. And did you know that the last time someone died in a school fire was 1958? In 1958, the School of Our Lady of the Angels in Chicago, Illinois, had 95 deaths. 95 deaths in a school fire. That was the last time Sorry, I misspoke. That is the last time a school had 10 or more deaths from a school fire. So there may have been fires after that produced less than 9 children dead, but that was the last mass casualty school fire in the United States. Why? Because the United States invested billions and billions of dollars into fire suppression systems in our schools, into fire extinguishers, fire alarms, and educational resources, such as teaching kids to stop, drop, and roll, teaching kids their evacuation plans, of which have an evacuation plan for your family. I know this is all normal, quote, normal disaster preparedness advice or stuff like that, but have you thought of a spot where if your house does catch fire, your family meets? Do you know what doors to go out of or what windows if you need to egress from your house when it's on fire? Those are things that you, as the husband, as the father, as the man of the house, that is your responsibility to plan and to ensure that your family is taken care of. So that is our response. That should be our response. Our response should be to learn, to grow, to take this seriously, because these are our families. These are our wives, our children. Do we do the same? We do the same with our churches and our businesses. So we should do the same here. These people are vastly, vastly more important in our levels of love. Our wives and our children are vastly more loved by us, more important to us. And I know that sounds harsh, but that's, we have different levels of love. And we're called to love everyone, yes, but we are supposed to provide and protect first and foremost, our own family. And that means protecting and providing for them against dangers such as fires. So, what are you going to do today? Do you need to go to the store and get a fire extinguisher or two? Do you need to go ahead and check your batteries of your smoke alarms, test them, make sure they work. Set up a house evacuation plan. Where are you going to meet if your house has a fire, or if there's some other emergency like flooding, but we're talking about fire today. So if your house catches fire, are you going to go to the neighbor across the street? Or maybe you have a friend who lives kitty corner to you, and go to them. Set up a family meeting place where all your people, your family members, your wife, your children, your dogs, whoever, are accounted for, can meet over there and be accounted for. Let the fire crews do their thing, obviously, but your job is to protect and prepare and provide. And fire protection is one of those. So thank you for listening today. Thank you for tuning in. If you liked this episode, if you like our series on our 3 S's, providing safety, stability, and service, leave us a like, a comment, subscribe if you haven't already. Thank you so much, and until next time, take action, become the men you were called to be, and enjoy.